In 1776, a group of farmers, lawyers, and rebels signed a piece of paper. They had no real army, no navy, no treasury, no alliances worth speaking of. Half the world's greatest military power was sitting on their doorstep, waiting to crush them. And yet, 250 years later, that same nation would control the world's reserve currency, command over 800 military bases across the globe, and produce more economic output than the next 3 countries combined. How? How does a ragged, divided, brand-new country become the most powerful nation in the history of human civilization? That is the question. And the answer is not what most people expect. The first gift America received was geography. The Atlantic Ocean to the east, the Pacific to the west, no powerful enemies sharing its borders, just land, an almost incomprehensible amount of land, stretching in every direction. While European empires bled themselves dry fighting each other across narrow borders, America had room to breathe, room to grow, room to fail and try again. In 1803, President Jefferson doubled the size of the country overnight, buying 800,000 square miles from Napoleon's France for $15 million. That's less than 3 cents per acre. The Louisiana Purchase, a real estate deal that no empire had ever seen before. But geography alone doesn't make a superpower. Plenty of large countries stayed poor for centuries. What made America different was the idea underneath it. The Constitution, imperfect, contested, revised in blood, established something radical, that power belonged to the people, that government could be held accountable, that a person could own property, build a business, and keep what they earned. People came, from Ireland during the famine, from Germany after the revolutions failed, from China to build the railroads, from everywhere, because America, whatever its contradictions, offered something the old world didn't: a chance. And ambition, it turns out, is the most powerful resource on Earth. In the second half of the 1800s, America didn't just grow, it erupted. Between 1865 and 1900, the United States built more miles of railroad than existed in all of Europe combined. 35,000 miles, 50, then 100,000. Steel rails stitching a continent together like a wound closing fast. A man named Andrew Carnegie figured out how to make steel cheaper than anyone thought possible. Another man, John D. Rockefeller, looked at the chaotic oil business and decided to own all of it. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled 90% of American oil refining. 90%! These weren't just businessmen. They were forces of nature, operating inside a system that had few rules and almost no limits. And the result was staggering. By 1900, the United States had overtaken the United Kingdom as the world's largest economy. A country that didn't exist when Mozart was alive was now richer than the empire that had ruled the waves for 200 years. But there's something important to say here, something that gets left out of the triumphant version of this story. That industrial miracle ran on the labor of people who were not free. The cotton that fed American textile mills came from enslaved hands. The railroads were built by Chinese workers who were paid less and risked more. The mines and factories were full of immigrants working 12-hour days in conditions that would horrify us today. Power is rarely clean. The question of how America became great is inseparable from the question of what it cost and who paid it. Then came the wars. World War I killed 17 million people. It shattered 4 empires. the Ottoman, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, the German. It left Europe exhausted, indebted, and bleeding. America entered late, emerged largely intact, and became the banker of the Reconstruction. But that was only the rehearsal. World War II was something different, something the world had never seen, and God willing, will never see again. 80 million dead, cities reduced to ash, entire civilizations erased. And at the end of it, Europe was rubble, Japan was rubble, the Soviet Union had lost 27 million of its own people, China was in civil war. America? Pause. America emerged from the Second World War with half of the entire world's industrial capacity. Its factories were untouched, its cities unburned, its farmland unshelled. While the rest of the world was rebuilding from nothing, America was already producing everything. Pause. In 1944, at a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, representatives from 44 nations gathered and made a decision that would echo for the next 80 years. They agreed that the US dollar would be the world's reserve currency. Not the pound, not gold, the dollar. In one stroke, every nation on Earth that wanted to buy oil, sell goods, or simply do business in the global economy would need American dollars to do it. That is not just power, that is a kind of power no empire in history had ever possessed before. The decades that followed are what historians call the American century. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Western Europe and quietly ensured those rebuilt nations aligned with Washington, not Moscow. The GI Bill sent millions of veterans to college, creating the largest educated middle class the world had ever seen. Then came the Cold War, 45 years of tension, proxy conflicts, and ideological combat against the Soviet Union. It was a competition fought in jungles, in laboratories, in space. On July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon. A human being standing on another world, because America decided it was possible and refused to stop until it happened. The Soviets never got there. When the Cold War ended in 1991 and the Soviet Union collapsed, the United States stood alone, the sole superpower, the unipolar moment, they called it. There was no rival, no counterweight, no second seat at the table. And then came the Internet. Born from a DARPA research project, commercialized by American companies, scaled by Silicon Valley into something that rewired human civilization. Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Meta. 5 companies, all American, collectively worth more than the GDP of every country in the world except China and the United States itself. Soft power followed hard power. American movies, music, fast food, blue jeans, exported to every corner of the earth. You could walk into a village with no running water in a remote corner of Asia and find a child wearing an NBA jersey. That is not accident. That is the cumulative weight of 250 years of ambition, immigration, geography, war, luck, brutality, and innovation, all arriving at the same moment in history. So how did America become a superpower? Geography gave it safety. Immigration gave it hunger. Industry gave it wealth. War gave it dominance. The dollar gave it leverage. and innovation gave it a future that others could only chase. But if you're looking for the single thread that runs through all of it, it is this. America has always been a place where the rules were being written as people lived them, where nothing was settled, where every generation had to decide again what this country was and what it was going to become. That restlessness, that refusal to accept that the way things are is the way they have to be, is both America's greatest strength and its deepest wound. It built the transcontinental railroad and enslaved the people who worked it. It put a man on the moon and couldn't guarantee that man a vote if his skin was the wrong color. It created the internet and let that internet tear its own democracy apart. Power doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from choices made by millions of people across hundreds of years to build something, to sacrifice something, to take something, and sometimes to lose something they can never get back. America became a superpower. The question that history is still answering